Hi, I'm Peggy Oliveira with Courageous Journeys. Thanks for joining me today. March is Social Work Month, so I'm going to talk a little bit about being a social worker in private practice. If you're wondering what Social Work Month is, you're not alone. Social work was really created in around the 60s, in the mid-60s I think, to really try to just educate people about what social work is, because social work is not a role, it is a profession. And what that means is that as a social worker, you have to get a degree in social work. It has to be through a university or a college that has been accredited by the Council on Social Work Education to be able to provide that degree. So for me, when I got my bachelor's degree, I actually went to a school that was in the process of being accredited. So my bachelor's degree is actually a Bachelor's of Science. It's not a BSW. But I majored in social work and sociology. And so when I went on to get my master's degree, I was able to get advanced standing because we had completed one part of that process. I still had a couple of extra classes I had to take, but to be a social worker, you have to have a degree in social work. And in some states, or at least it used to be the case in Illinois when I was first a social worker, that in order to call yourself a social worker, you actually had to be licensed as a social worker. And you can be licensed as a bachelor's level social worker, but you would have an LSW, which is licensed social worker. If you have a master's degree, you can, after you've had 3,000 hours of experience or 3,200 hours of experience, depending on the state that you live in, maybe even more than that in some states, you can then become an LCSW, which is a licensed clinical social worker. And you have to be an LCSW to practice independently psychotherapy type services. So that is what I am. And when I decided to be a social worker, I really didn't know what social work was, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. My initial inclination was to go towards psychology, because I was really interested in human behavior and why people do the things that they do. And then I found sociology and was actually quite interested in that as well, because I think that all the different aspects that go into society are very important in forming and shaping people. And so then I found social work, which really combined the best of both of those worlds, because social work is really about looking at people in the context of their environment, no matter what role you have as a social worker. So I decided to go into social work. And I've had some different roles throughout the process, from internships through where I am now in private practice. And much of the time, though, has spent doing therapy and advocating. And I will say that as somebody in private practice, I miss some of those other aspects of being a social worker, because I have to be available to my clients, and so it doesn't allow me the opportunity to really just go out there and go to lobbying days and do that kind of thing, because I'm working so closely with my clients on an individual basis. But being in private practice as a social worker is really not that much different than being in private practice with doing counseling or marriage and family therapy or psychology or whatever it may be. But I think one of the biggest differences, generally speaking, is, obviously this isn't the case all the time, but is that as a social worker, it doesn't matter whether I'm doing individual therapy, group therapy, doing a community presentation, or being an advocate, or whatever it is. Everything that I'm doing in my role is from the perspective of social work. So it's about thinking about the person in the context of their environment. And so in doing that, if I have a client who is struggling with finding resources for their child who is struggling in school, I don't only help them deal with their feelings about their child struggling in school, I will look for resources to help them. So I may do a search to find what community resources are available. Hopefully I'm aware of some resources in my community that are available to them, whether it's advocacy services or whether it's support services, and I try to help incorporate those services into what they're using to manage whatever the difficulty is. And not that other people don't do that as well, but as our code of ethics, that's actually part of what we are supposed to be doing, because no matter what somebody's struggle is, it's never in isolation. There's always other factors that come into play. And so as somebody in private practice, that's a big part of how I approach the work that I do. So the other parts of the work that I do, in addition to meeting with people individually, is I do couples work and occasionally I do family work, but I also do group work. And I really enjoy doing that piece of it because it's so, it's fun, it's fascinating, it's exciting, and it's ever-changing. You know, every group session is different than the one before because it's the dynamics of the people in the group, and every week it's going to be different. So I really enjoy that piece of it. What I have tried to do additionally as somebody in private practice is keep some of those social work values intact by, when I can, being involved in community type of things. So my passion is in primarily sexual assault, but also domestic violence. And so being involved in the community in regards to things that they're doing for sexual assault awareness or domestic violence awareness, Take Back the Night, when I find out about legislation and trying to get involved in that. I'm involved with NASW, though I would like to be able to do more of that, but my client schedule is making that a little bit difficult at times, but being involved with that so that I can become more involved with advocacy and legislation and that sort of thing, because while doing clinical work seems to not be related to those other things at all, those other things are greatly impacting the clients that we work with. So you have to be able to be aware of all of those things and try to change the things that are negatively affecting the clients that you're working with. I love what I do. I love being in private practice. I mean, how can you not love setting your own hours and being your own boss and all of that? But there's a lot to it. You know, one of the things as a helping profession in general, whether it's social work or counseling, whatever it may be, there's not a lot of business courses. So being in private practice, there's a big learning curve. There's a lot that you have to learn about that you're not really taught in school. And I'm not suggesting that you should be taught that in school, because a lot of social workers don't go into private practice. But there are some things that you have to learn. You're also much more isolated in general, not just as a social worker, but being in private practice is somewhat isolating. You know, when you're in an agency, when you're in school, you have your colleagues that you can, you know, hop into their office and just say hi or check in and say, oh my God, I just need to vent a little, or, you know, whatever it is. And when you're in private practice, you don't really have the opportunity to do that, which can be kind of difficult at times. I think it's important to stay involved in the field in whatever ways that you can, and I would certainly encourage you to do that. Because of licensing requirements, you know, you have to have your continuing education and all of that, which I think is really important, and there's some nice colleague interaction there, which is good, but you do need to make a very concerted effort to make sure that you are involving yourself in different ways of just being in your community and getting professional support and that sort of thing. So I wouldn't change it. I love having the practice that I do. I get to specialize in the work that I want to specialize in. I got to decide where I wanted my office to be. I got to decorate it the way that I wanted to. I get to see the clients that I want to. It's, you know, I'm very fortunate to be able to do what I do, but it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do either. So if it's something that you're considering, I would definitely encourage you to do it. I think a degree in social work is really a great way to go. Even if your school does not necessarily focus on clinical aspects of social work, you can choose, if you want to do private practice, you can choose to take more courses that are geared in that way. But as a social worker, because everything is about understanding people in the context of their environment, while you may not be learning about the DSM specifically, you are learning about people and what affects them and why they do the things that they do. And you can take a DSM course, you can understand CPT codes and all of that, which if you don't take insurance, you actually don't need to worry about. So, and I do not take insurance, although I do provide a super bill so that people can get reimbursed if they choose to. But that's an option as well. So I hope that maybe this has been helpful for you. Maybe you've gained some insight if you've been thinking about social work. I think it's a great field. I wouldn't change it at all, not for a second. In fact, maybe as I continue to go on, I may choose to lessen what I'm doing in private practice and get more involved in maybe some advocacy or public policy or something like that. But with a social work background and my degree, I can do that, and that's one of the great things about social work. You can do so many different things with your degree. So let me know if you have any questions. I hope it's been helpful, and I will look forward to seeing you next time.